On May 22nd, 2025, PhysicsGirl posted a long-awaited update video about her health struggles from the last couple years. This video pulled in 3 million views. In it, she talks about her deterioration due to long COVID and her slowly regaining the ability to live normally again, though she is still not back to her old self and may never be. That wasn't all though, because she also chose to use this video to highlight the struggles of a friend of hers who is facing similar health problems. This is where it started to feel off to me. PhysicsGirl, aka Dianna, spends a good portion of the video talking about her friend Tobias and what he's going through, how they bonded over their shared experiences, and how desperately he needs help. She says her health had been getting better, but the stress over Tobias wanting to pursue MAID, medical assistance in dying, caused her to get worse again. Since he's from Germany, this is a real option for him, unlike here in the United States. She says his health is so bad that they can only text because he doesn't have the energy to speak over the phone. She lists symptoms Tobias suffers with, including but not limited to intense burning in his muscles, being unable to look at a clock or a phone, and crashing if he laughs. Cue the GoFundMe plug, with a hefty goal of 120,000 euros. To summarize, a conventionally attractive man on the other side of the world is the most sick a person could possibly be, so sick he can't even speak or look at a screen, and he needs money or else he's going to kill himself. Somehow this isn't an episode of Catfish, but it sure feels like it to me. Before I get too far into this, I would just like to add a little disclaimer. I'm going to be talking about a number of illnesses and diseases that are medically controversial. I am not a medical doctor, so I'm going to be proceeding under the assumption that every illness or disease that I'm speaking about is real, and I'll do my best to explain things accurately when I need to, but please do your own research. Also, while there will be some light criticism of PhysicsGirl, the point of this video is not to criticize or attack her. What I'm trying to do is figure out if someone else is using her and her platform for nefarious reasons. I genuinely wish her nothing but the best. I will be referring to her by Dianna exclusively from here on out. In general, I do not condone any harassment of anyone that is mentioned in this video, and I will be censoring names whenever possible. I will be referencing posts made on the platform X, but for simplicity, I will just be calling it Twitter. I do not have a Twitter account, so my screenshots are all sourced from Knitter or archive.org. Now let's get into it. I'm going to be talking about ME/CFS, which is short for myalgic encephalomyelitis chronic fatigue syndrome. So let me explain it real quick. This is characterized by profound fatigue that doesn't go away with rest. This is often in the form of PEM, post-exertional malaise, which means doing something, anything physically, mentally, or even emotionally leads to a crash where symptoms worsen significantly for a period of time. Sometimes this is merely hours, but it can be as long as months. This is not just feeling a little tired. This is often completely losing the ability to do basic tasks for yourself, like eating, maintaining hygiene, watching TV, so on and so forth. The cause of this disease is unknown, and there are no tests for it. It can only be diagnosed based on symptoms and ruling out other diseases. It often appears after an infection, but it's not necessarily the infection causing the disease. It's more like the infection awakens the disease. There is no official treatment or cure for the disease. It is mostly about managing symptoms. The severity of it can vary, where it can be very minor and not really impact daily life, or it can be so severe that the individual needs 24/7 care. So Dianna has ME/CFS, which was triggered by COVID, or more specifically long COVID, which does share a lot of symptoms with ME/CFS, but it is its own distinct thing. So not everyone that has long COVID has ME/CFS and vice versa. This is how she met Tobias. as he also suffers from ME/CFS and is pretty active in the online community surrounding this disease. I'm not sure exactly how they initially got in touch with each other because there is very little public interaction between the two of them. In her video, she initially brings him up because she experienced a severe crash that undid months of work. Her theory for why this crash happened is that she was distressed from hearing the news that Tobias was approved for MAID. So I want to start by dissecting what all she says about him and why it concerned me enough to look deeper.
Tobias lives in Germany, but we became like fast best friends just so quickly.
I know it's not impossible to quickly hit it off with someone, especially when you have big things in common, but to feel instantly super close with someone is a sign that maybe they are lying or exaggerating to force a close connection in a short period of time. This is often called love bombing, which does not have to be romantic, though it often is.
Because we had the same experience and I knew exactly, what he's going through in a way that no one else who hasn't been through this could possibly understand.
You and me against the world is a classic manipulation tactic. Nobody could possibly understand what we have, what we are going through. What we share is special. This is a subtle way to isolate someone from their friends or loved ones. It becomes us versus them. They will never understand what we have, so how can you trust them? I'm not saying this is what's happening, but from an outside perspective, it is alarming to hear.
Somehow it finally allowed me to think back on what my life was like before all this happened, because I couldn't for a while because it made me too sad.
This one is very interesting to me, especially combined with her saying she crashed as a result of him being approved for assisted suicide. The emotional connection Dianna felt towards Tobias was enough to make her feel optimistic for life again, and crash due to distress over his situation. These highs and lows she's talking about don't feel platonic to me. This is an emotional roller coaster that I've seen in toxic romantic relationships, not in a typical friendship. I'm not accusing Dianna of being unfaithful to her husband, but I do believe there is more going on with her relationship with Tobias than she is letting on, and it's possible this isn't even something she's consciously aware of. I do believe Tobias is aware of what's going on though, as there are some concerning patterns in his history, which I will get more into later.
I can't talk to Tobias. I just text with him back and forth. Like, that's all he's capable of.
This one is obvious. Not being able to speak or video chat with someone is the ultimate catfish red flag. His reasoning behind this is that ME/CFS has put him in a state where merely whispering a few words is so labor-intensive that it causes severe seizure-like crashes. So as a result, his ex-girlfriend Linda speaks to Dianna for him about his condition and history for the video, while he just sends a text talking about what he's going through. The combination of all these things feels like one big red flag to me, especially with the timing of it all. Dianna is clearly struggling physically and mentally, and Tobias enters her life. She starts getting better with his support, then he drops an emotional bomb on her, bringing her back down again. But wait, it'll all be okay if only he could afford all these treatments that are outlandishly expensive and not covered by insurance, which, lucky for him, she has a huge following to make that happen for him. Now, if you think it's interesting that his ex-girlfriend was willing to be in this video for him, I did too. So I looked into their relationship a little bit. It seems as though they broke up sometime in 2024 or maybe late 2023 after having been together for 11 years, which is a long time to be with someone and not get married, but I'm not here to judge that. What's more interesting is he has talked about her on Twitter, saying that she emotionally abused him, forced him to undergo harmful treatments, was just waiting to take over his business, and had multiple boyfriends in a short period of time after they broke up. All of his tweets about this were accompanied by #PTSD, but I don't know whether he's implying that he has PTSD from those medical treatments or her treatment of him, or both. There's even this tweet that implies that Linda blocked and ghosted him and wouldn't send a photo of their dog to him for Christmas, even after he begged. He also says here that he gave her everything, including financial freedom, which I just think is an interesting thing to throw into the mix. It's not impossible that they may have reconciled things after those tweets, but those are some bold claims, and I imagine it would be very difficult on both sides to move past that. If you look even further into his Twitter history, there is a lot of evidence that she has had access to his account. There are times where she openly says, "This is Linda," but other times where his tweets are just suddenly in the third person. This really makes you wonder how often she was on his account, and when exactly she would have lost access to it, if ever. Using the Wayback Machine, you can see that Tobias actually used to have in his bio that she would tweet for him, and that his Twitter handle has changed over the last few years. Just 2 years ago, he was going by S_way, which then changed to Glimmer in Absence, which is what it was when he initially started talking to Dianna. And now it's finally 992 Tobias. For context, in mental health circles, a glimmer is a small moment of joy. Now, if you look on his Instagram, he also uses the username 992 Tobias, but there is evidence that he used to go by Tobias_SCT, and it says his username has changed a total of 3 times. I don't know why he would change his usernames, it's just another thing I noticed. Alongside this, the way that he used to tweet is notably different than how he does now. Right now, everything he says is very polished, whereas before, he tweeted in German more often. He was willing to engage in silly conversations and even argue and insult people. You could chalk this up to him feeling better and therefore having more energy for these flippant interactions. Or maybe he feels the pressure of having Diana's entire fan base watching him, which I think might be more likely given the fact that his social media is all private now. I got a feeling he was using AI due to the regular use of M-dashes, but he doesn't speak English natively, so this could be the result of the German education system actually teaching proper grammar, unlike here where M-dashes are pretty uncommon in non-academic text. But regardless, sometimes he uses real M-dashes, while other times it's a regular singular dash. So whether this is the result of him using AI, or purposely changing how he talks to please a larger audience, or using voice to text, or maybe having Linda speak for him, or Linda using AI to speak for him, something is weird about the change. By looking through his Twitter, I was able to piece together a timeline of his illness, but not entirely because of him. There were a few other Twitter users who reported his story and problems he was having. He himself never gave a complete timeline of his own story. I would also just like to note that the people who had more of his story were both women. Just keep that in mind while we go over it. Tobias's health problems started in 2010 due to being bitten by a sea lion, but he was still around 90% capable. At the end of 2015, he experienced his first major crash, which was apparently triggered by extremely long work days, tons of physical activity, regular drinking, and being outside with a cold. He took antibiotics in 2016 that led to a flare-up of mast cell activation syndrome. 2016 is when most of his social media was created, both Instagram and Twitter. He posted on Instagram normally, just travel pictures mostly, so it seemed as though nothing of note happened again until 2021. This is when he mentions ME for the first time on Twitter, and when he says he is no longer capable of getting out of bed. 2022 was a very quiet year for him, so I believe this is when the forced hospital stay happened that Dianna mentions in her video. 2023 was the beginning of the Tobias we know today, desperate for help, suicidal, and extremely active in the MECFS community on Twitter. August 2024 is the first time he mentions assistance in dying on Twitter. The first public interaction between Dianna and Tobias was in November 2024 on her Dianna Hayes account. Dianna helped him create a Patreon and his GoFundMe in early May 2025. Since then, he has been grateful, but ultimately after a couple months, he made both his Twitter and Instagram private. This is not an unreasonable timeline. I just think it's important to have some context for how this all happened. But what I think is most interesting is the fact that other female Twitter users are the ones reporting parts of his story. These two women also know Tobias through the ME/CFS community, and they seem to have a fairly intimate view into his situation. The motivation behind them tweeting about him is to try to get him more help, since he may not have the energy to seek it out himself. There is also some evidence of a little flirting, like this tweet where someone assumes there's a romantic relationship between her and Tobias, which she says isn't the case, and Tobias responds with a ring emoji. There are other instances of him being a little overly friendly, possibly flirting with women outside his main circle. There is even a time where one of these women thanks Tobias for sending her a small gift, and another time where he hints at maybe sending a Christmas present with a heart emoji. To be fair, he has also sent at least one gift to a man as well, and engages in friendly, flirty conversations with men. So on the outside, these do seem plausible as strictly friendly interactions, but it does feel like a pattern where Tobias is very intensely involved with these women privately when his health is better, and then they are desperate to get him help when he crashes, even if it's harmful to their own well-being. There's even this tweet where she says Tobias found her, implying that he was the one searching for people to talk to and he messaged first. This is particularly curious because this only started happening after he became single. It's honestly the perfect setup to make someone feel like, I can fix him, especially considering what he said about his ex abusing and abandoning him. His Twitter banner image also encourages this whole narrative. This is a reference to the incident in 2018 where Richard Russell effectively stole a plane for a joyride and then purposely crashed it to commit suicide. The full quote is, "Just a broken guy, got a few screws loose, I guess. Never really knew it until now." This specific image is not the actual photo of the incident. It is art done by the artist known as Skokie, who is most popular for their furry art on the website Fur Affinity. It is one of the first things to come up if you search Sky King on Google Images, so that most likely explains how Tobias found it. But this was another fairly recent change, as he used to use pictures of him and Linda together as shown in the archived versions of his Twitter. Obviously, since they broke up, I don't blame him for changing it, but it's interesting that this is the message he wants to put out into the world. So Tobias has this fairly big, active presence on Twitter, but what about other social media? He does have a Pinterest with the username Tobias Melontree, which you'll see how I know that's him later. It doesn't have any pins or posts, so nothing interesting there. He also tried to use Facebook with the name Tobias Swee to participate in ME/CFS communities, but he wasn't allowed to. He says he made a Facebook and tried to join a group, only to be rejected because his account was too new. So he then made a couple Facebook posts, then tried again. But this time they asked for a photo of him with his dog to prove that he's real since his account was too new and had no interactions from friends. He could not comply with this and was blocked from the group. Not only that, but according to a post from one of his Twitter friends, she cannot even talk about him in a specific ME/CFS Facebook group. So just the mere discussion of him is prohibited. It sounds like they have the same suspicions as I do. He has mentioned that his ex took the dog, so it's obviously unreasonable to ask him to take a picture with the dog, but it's not unreasonable to ask for a picture of him in general. So there's two main issues here. One, he has an old Facebook account, this one, using the name Tobias Swee. As far as I can tell, it hasn't been used in quite some time, but it exists. If he could go through the effort to make a new account, it's reasonable to assume he could go through the effort to access his old account, even if he forgot the password. 2. Why couldn't he just take a new photo of his face? I suspect every picture we've seen of him is old. Obviously, the ones where he is out and about and looking healthy are older, but ultimately there's no timeline for when any photos were taken. There was a period of time after he got very sick where his hair was long, but based on the most recent picture on his GoFundMe, his hair must be short now. But this picture looks like it was taken just a few days after this picture, since his facial hair is slightly longer. And then this is an old picture with his dog where his head is shaved, whereas in most of his older photos his hair is short but not shaved. The choice to make some photos black and white is also very interesting to me, because why would it matter? Would color give something away? Oxygen tubing is also seen in some of his photos, which implies that he's very sick, but it is probably one of the easiest things to acquire that looks medical. You can buy it on Amazon for very little. This is the only medical equipment or supplies that we have ever seen in a photo that includes his face. Otherwise, we've only ever seen it on his bed or very zoomed in somewhere else, like this picture of an IV drip or just a picture of his arm. Alongside this, there's only one picture that shows the room he's in, which is this one featuring a gift from Dianna, which I don't believe is in the same room as the IV drip photo. This white border here doesn't seem to be reminiscent of anything visible in this photo. It would have to be in the middle of the wall for this photo to make any sense, so I think these are two different rooms. Now, it's not impossible that he could be moved around, especially if he's in a hospital bed with wheels, but something else that's interesting about the background of this photo is that there's huge French doors here, and based on the dark curtains, I would assume that they lead outside. They might not, I can't be sure. I just know it would be very strange to put a man who claims to need to be in total darkness in a room with huge windows. So most of the photos of him sick are close-ups of his face, except for this one and this one, which has never been posted anywhere as far as I can tell, but it was featured in this video. So these two pictures were taken to highlight how thin he is. He claims to be 6'2" and around 100 to 110 pounds. If you've ever seen a tall, thin man who doesn't work out religiously shirtless, they all kind of look like this. So to me, these photos do not paint a picture of a man who needs medical intervention to eat, but I could be wrong. This photo also shows that it's possible for someone else to take pictures of him. All of the pictures that he's posted of himself when he's sick were selfies, but this one looks like it was taken from above by someone else, or perhaps he took it using a selfie stick. Either way, it's possible for photos to be taken from a distance and show more of his situation, but he chooses not to for some reason. Another example of the photo timeline being muddled is found on the Facebook that he made. In this post, he says the last picture is how he is today. It's another black and white photo of his face that looks very similar to these other two pictures. It was still very clearly taken on a different day since you can see the change in his facial hair, but these could all be from the same week. Something else I noticed is that he's been very selective about what he's willing to share, which is fine, but basically every picture he shared of himself recently makes him look good, like model good. I was able to find a few pictures where that isn't the case and he looks arguably worse. I found this photo on a job-related website where he looks normal, but clearly not the same as his other photos. Then there was this one that he was using as a profile picture on Twitter for a while, and this one with Linda that was his header. These definitely portray him as much sicker than these ones, so why wouldn't he use them? To be clear, I'm not trying to critique or shame the way that he looks, but just objectively, he looks unwell in these photos compared to the ones he has up now. One final thing about his photos, you can't find them anywhere. I know there are people who try to live a very private life, but usually you can find something. He has no tagged pictures on Instagram. Even people he's tagged have no pictures of him anywhere on their accounts. His original Facebook is extremely private. Linda's accounts are also very private. Nobody who has interacted with either of their accounts have any pictures of them public. You cannot reverse image search any photo he's posted and find it somewhere else. Again, this isn't an impossible situation, but it does feel very calculated. Most people have photos of themselves floating around online in some capacity, whether it's family or friends posting it or an old account they no longer use, something. Especially since a few of these pictures were taken by other people, clearly in a group setting. So for none of the pictures that he himself uses now to exist anywhere else that I could find is strange. Now I wanted to talk about his business. He claims his business hired predominantly disabled people. He also says Linda was just attempting to wait out their relationship so she could take over the business, implying that it was very successful. I was able to find the business, but I was not able to confirm anything he said about it. Melon Tree UG was founded in 2018, with Tobias being named managing director. So this is how I know that Pinterest account was his, since it was called Tobias Melon Tree. I believe it's some sort of drop shipping operation, as I couldn't find much else about it from the name alone. They filed several different word marks, one of which I was able to find both an Instagram and an Amazon storefront for. Belief. I'm confident this is at least part of what his business is, since there is this tweet where he mentions sending seeds to some type of charity event, and the Belief Instagram account follows him. So while I can't prove that Linda was waiting to take over the business, I can prove that she did take over. In early 2023, she was named managing director. In the grand timeline, this means it happened after Tobias became severely sick, but most likely before they actually broke up. So I don't know if he only started to think she just wanted the business after she took it over, or before, but regardless, I don't believe she owns it anymore. It looks as though it was sold to an unrelated person in October of this year, 2025. I don't know if this means anything in the grand scheme of things, but it was worth going over. There's a couple other things about Linda that I would like to touch on. I've mentioned that she had, or maybe still has, access to his Twitter, but that's not the only thing that she was in charge of. Thanks to the Wayback Machine, I was able to find these tweets in which Linda, on Tobias's account, says she has power of attorney when it comes to medical decisions. If you are lucky enough to not know what that means, it's basically a privilege you can give to another person so they can make decisions for you in the case that you are unable to. So we can see here that even though she has this power, she is unable to see him while he's under the care of his family. Around the same time, there was this post which shows that Linda believed his family deemed him mentally incompetent. One of the letters is about receiving a psychiatric evaluation, and the other is about guardianship proceedings, so that someone else can manage his affairs for him. The date is still visible on the latter, and it's from April 2023. For reference, in 2023, he was active on Twitter, and Linda had taken over the business. I speculate that the forced hospital stay that's been mentioned before happened the year prior, so it's a very interesting series of events. On that topic, I would like to go over things that I feel haven't been addressed enough, starting with the very beginning. Tobias has never said he was bitten by a sea lion. Someone else said that for him. I think this is interesting because, well, it's an interesting origin story. In fact, I would genuinely like to know how that would even happen, but he's never mentioned it himself. Allegedly, this sea lion bite led to a tetanus shot, which led to meningitis and pericarditis, which are inflammation of the membrane surrounding the brain and spinal cord, and inflammation of the sac surrounding the heart, respectively. This seems like a pretty big thing to just not mention, especially if it's how you got into this situation to begin with. There is this video where I found a new picture of Tobias, and it features him talking. I will play a short clip of this, just so everyone knows what it sounds like.
Hallo, mein Name ist Tobias. Ich bin seit 2010 an ME/CFS erkrankt und seit 2021 schwerst betroffen.
I could not find anywhere that Tobias mentions this. For him in his condition, I feel like he would be very proud of it. He mustered all the strength he had to speak for this medical conference, to raise awareness for his debilitating disease. Yet, nothing. There is evidence that he did at one point have a tweet about it, but whatever this was has since been deleted. I also found this tweet where he references a charity fundraiser that he posted about on Instagram, yet there was no Instagram post about it. I noticed when I was initially looking into this that the number of tweets he had would occasionally get lower, which means he does go back and delete things for some reason. I started looking into this shortly after the PhysicsGirl update, so it's been a few months, but in that time he has removed around 500 followers, followed 9 new people, tweeted 31 times, and liked around 400 new tweets. I cannot see his Twitter anymore since I don't actually use that website and I can only spectate, but it is very interesting to me that he would remove followers after making his account private. It reeks of paranoia, probably because he doesn't want someone like me digging into things. So on the topic of Tobias potentially deleting tweets and not advertising his own advocacy efforts, he actually has a history of being aggressive towards those who he deems not as sick as him. This community honestly pisses me off, so passive and delusional. 99% of mild patients are too busy whining on this platform and watching Gossip Girl. I understand being frustrated, but it's not a good look to use your limited energy seething at people who are slightly better off than you. He even accused someone in this community of scamming people using a GoFundMe. The purpose of pointing this out is not to criticize his morality, but to point out hypocrisy. He expects us to believe him with minimal communication and no concrete proof that he needs the help in the form of 120,000 euro, while he doesn't even believe people in his own community and criticizes them when they complain about their own life experiences and symptoms just because he doesn't think it's bad enough. Now this next thing is more about his morality, because this here is definitely an anti-Semitic post. I understand doctors can be wrong and they aren't always good people, but this is a pretty wild post in my opinion, especially combined with this one where he says he has proof of mistreatment but won't share it or report them. You can just say they aren't good doctors or they weren't good to you without implying what this is implying. Moving on, you might be wondering who takes care of Tobias now since his ex-girlfriend is most likely out of the picture. His GoFundMe states that some of the money will go to finding full-time caregivers for him, but clearly this is something he cannot do without for any amount of time. I was able to find an article about him that says his aunt and uncle take care of him, plus this tweet in November 2024 where he says his aunt takes care of him. There's been no recent confirmation that this is still true, so your guess is as good as mine. He has mentioned many times that his family has abandoned him or refused to believe him. So it's interesting to me that there is still someone in his family that feels responsible for him. And somehow it's not his parents. I wonder if his parents were the ones attempting to deem him mentally incompetent from those tweets I talked about earlier, and that's why they seem to be uninvolved now. This also makes it more interesting to me that Linda was the one speaking about him in Dianna's video, and not his aunt, who seems to be the one actually present in his life right now. I was not able to find any of his family online. I did try just to see if they ever posted about him and his situation. So I don't know if they're just very private or they don't use social media or maybe they don't share a last name with him. Now let's discuss his GoFundMe. Currently, it has a goal of 120,000 euros. Thanks to the Wayback Machine, I can see that it actually started at 40,000 and has gone up several times until it reached its current goal. Dianna is the co-organizer and has posted one of the updates herself. So what is the money going towards? Medications, specialized nutrition, medical supplies, caregivers, and SCIG therapy, which is an antibody replacement therapy. This picture is of a device that administers it. So all of this is pretty self-explanatory. These are all things he needs to live on a day-to-day basis. In his own words, this amount of money pays for approximately a year of his life. Nothing he initially listed would cure his ailments, only stop him from dying, which is honestly a little confusing to me because he has said that you won't die from this disease, it makes you do it yourself, and his mass amount of suicide baiting on Twitter, which is a common thing in the ME/CFS community, by the way. I don't know, maybe I'm getting a little too caught up on semantics. Regardless, only after the GoFundMe started gaining some traction did he decide to elaborate and say the money will go towards various testing to help identify the many causes of every disease he has to further attempt to find treatments that will help. By his own estimates, it costs him 6,000 euros just to live every month, which is a total of 72,000 a year. So his initial goal of 40,000 was to support him for just over 6 months. The additional money must be for all the new things he's hoping to try that he didn't even think about until after it hit 20,000 in donations. He also says he has other income streams, so he's not entirely relying on the GoFundMe for everything. I don't know what exactly he means by this. It could be a disability stipend from the government, or maybe he's talking about the business, or maybe his family pays for some things. Who really knows? So the GoFundMe has his long list of medical problems, including but not limited to ME/CFS, MCAS, POTS, gastroparesis, and mitochondrial dysfunction. He has also mentioned small fiber neuropathy, visual snow syndrome, and PTSD. So without getting too far into what those are, most of them have some form of diagnostic test or concrete criteria in order to diagnose, as in, you can prove that it's happening. The average person, such as myself, may not be able to look at a blood test and go, oh yeah, that's definitely that disease. But the point is that there should be some irrefutable evidence that someone is afflicted. The only time we've seen anything close to medical records of any sort for Tobias is in those letters that Linda posted that I talked about before. The main disease that he has, ME/CFS, which I covered in more detail earlier, you cannot get concrete evidence that it's happening. But we've never even seen an official diagnosis. It's hard not to feel skeptical that these records just may not exist. Obviously, nobody is required to share information that is so personal, but it would be a very easy and simple way to dispel any doubt, especially when you're asking for a lot of money. On the topic of this long list of ailments, something that stood out to me when I was reading about all of them individually is that most of them are diagnosed in women more often than men. There could be non-medical reasons for this, like maybe men are just less likely to see a doctor when they're having symptoms. Maybe the doctors who specialize in these diseases are biased and diagnose women more than men. Who knows? I'm not saying that men can't be afflicted by diseases that women typically have, but it does put Tobias in a unique position to have the opposite sex feel especially sympathetic or empathetic towards him, especially from those within these communities. It is not uncommon in groups that are predominantly male or female for the opposite sex to garner way more attention than is typical. Think about men in nursing positions or women in the auto industry. They stand out, and I believe Tobias is no exception, which works in his favor. So I believe that covers everything that I uncovered. Obviously, I'm skeptical of Tobias and the entire situation. I think it's really hard not to be. I think there's so many possibilities for what's actually happening here that I don't even know what I think is going on anymore. I initially started this quest thinking it was a cut and dry catfishing, but now I'm not convinced that it's that simple. I haven't seen anyone else talk about this, which was really surprising to me, so I'm very interested to hear other people's opinions on the entire situation. Whether you agree or not, please let me know. Thank you so much for watching.